Are your core workouts leaving your body feeling worse? Maybe your back feels like it's tightening up, or there's some zinging going down your leg, or your core doesn't feel like it's getting any stronger despite doing all the exercises you know how to do. There are some very simple reasons why this is, and on today's episode of the Exercise is Health podcast, we're diving into what they are and what you can do about it. Welcome to the Exercise is Health podcast, where we will be breaking down the strategies and tactics you need to know to build your health, strength, and function without feeling achy, sore, or injured.
We're your hosts, Julie and Charlie, the creators of the Exercise for Life membership. Your podcast starts now.
Hey, welcome back, exercisers, to the Exercise is Health podcast, brought to you by Exercise for Life Studios, where we believe your health is your most valuable asset, and the single best thing you can do to both boost and protect this asset is exercise. Specifically, exercise is geared towards building the health and function of your muscles. We're your hosts, Charlie
and Julie,
and today we are talking about why your crunches aren't cutting it, okay? And especially why your core workouts are leaving you feeling lousy. Look, if you've ever done a core workout and your low back has tightened up, or you've gotten this zinging down your leg, you know exactly what we are talking about. So why does this happen, and what can you do about it to make sure it doesn't happen again going forward? That's exactly what we want to lay out for you today.
Charlie, I think core work is one of those things that everyone knows they should be doing it. Probably if you've gone to the doctor and you said, oh, I've got an achy low back, they probably was like, well, do you do core work? And the most common thing that we hear when we think about core work is like crunches, which, is a fine exercise. It's a very small piece of the entire picture of core work. But if you start working your core appropriately and you are able to body match all the principles that we talk about but apply to the core, this will create a most favorable environment in your core so that your core gets stronger, more mobile, more flexible, and more ready to do the stuff that you want to do. The problem is the way that core exercises are advertised to us, the way that we see it being done by others, will often leave us all feeling sore and achy. And I don't know about you, but you've probably done some if you're listening to this podcast, and you've probably felt those kind of negative side effects from doing inappropriate core work or just crunches.
Oh, for sure. I mean, one of the biggest things about the mainstream fitness industry is, they'll give exercises for their six-pack abs, right? And it's like, hey, do this abs program and you're going to end up with abs. Well, guess what? We all have abs, okay? Whether or not you can see them is a different question, but we all have abs. So the thought of these exercises are going to get you abs, well, that really doesn't make any sense. So the question is, okay, well, if we're not doing exercises to get abs, for our core, then why are we doing them, and how do we actually go about strengthening our core in a way that leaves our body feeling well, in a way that leaves our body functioning better? Now, before we dive into the steps to do this, we do want to give a disclaimer. Look, if you're having some kind of low back issue, if you have some kind of symptom going on that you are currently or not currently seeing a medical professional for, we're not telling you to, override their opinion based on what we are talking about today. What we're talking about today is a framework of advice to follow, of steps to apply to your workouts. So once you are cleared for regular exercise, when you go and you do your exercises, you follow these frameworks, and these are going to give you the best opportunity to have a favorable outcome as far as strengthening your core, as far as leaving your workouts feeling well and allowing you to function better after your workout.
You're right, Charlie. One thing that you said I really love was that when you do appropriate core workouts, it's going to leave your muscles of your core in the most favorable way. Meaning, if you do some certain things, it doesn't mean that you now become, invincible or that nothing can ever happen to you. But when you strengthen your core appropriately, it really sets the foundation for, hey, at least this area can be strong. But there are many factors that are an issue for this that we're currently presented with. So we want to share with you the framework that we follow when we're thinking about working our core. The first thing is that a lot of us know a lot of ab exercises, and working your abs is really great, but it's also only 1/4 of all the motions that your core does. So the first thing is to address all the motions. The second thing is how you're doing these motions. And we really want to talk about the how you do these motions, because the how is the way that you're going to customize exercise to fit your body, because there's not one size that fits all. Every single exercise, core or not core exercises, needs to be customized to how your body is working in that day. And we call this body matching.
Absolutely. That really is the key to making sure that you leave your workouts feeling stronger, functioning better, and just overall building the health and function of your body. So when we talk about like the 4 motions that your core can perform or that your spine can perform, we're talking about kind of like a rounding forward that we're most familiar with is like the crunching motion, or, we might look at like the slouching motion, but it's a motion that our spines are designed to be able to perform. And so that's one way to challenge our spines and the muscles that control our core is this, this forward flexion or this forward rounding. Then there's also the opposite direction. There's the arching, okay? The arching, or what we might call trunk extension or spinal extension. So that's 1, forward folding; 2, arching back; 3 is going to be this kind of side to side motion, almost if you imagine like a windshield wiper and kind of going back and forth, or like a side crunch, through your trunk. And then number 4 is then the trunk rotation or the twisting motion. And so why we bring that up is because you need to understand those 4 motions if you are going to make sure you are appropriately and optimally challenging your core, because we need to be able to include all of them. Julie, exactly what you said. Most programs by the mainstream fitness industry really focus on the crunching, the abs, because those are the things we see in the mirror. Those are the things we feel burning, okay? Sometimes they'll throw in some trunk rotation stuff. Rarely is there any kind of side to side, and almost never are you going to find any kind of extension. And if you do find any kind of extension or arching back of the spine, the percentage of that relative to the crunching motion, I mean, it's minimal. It's almost like, are you just throwing this in there so you can say that it was in here, or are you actually trying to challenge these muscles? Because if there's a list of say like 20 exercises, 10 of them are going to be crunching, 5 of them are going to be twisting. There might be 3 that are some like side to side, and maybe 1 or 2 are going to be some kind of extension thing. So the percentage of exercises that are dedicated to actually working the muscles of the low back and along the backside of the trunk and the spine, they're really small, and that's where we see so many issues come up for so many people.
Absolutely. And if you think about which of those exercises you do or don't do, anyone that leaves out any of those 4, you're leaving that motion vulnerable to injury. And really, remember, we exercise and strengthen our body so that we can live our life more fully, right? So we don't want to be leaving out any of these motions. And if you are thinking, well, I've tried that, it doesn't work for me, well then keep listening, because this is the approach that we're going to take, and this is how you body match and make sure that you can train those 4 motions while respecting your body, while making sure you're body matching and making it appropriate for your body, because it's always about making exercise appropriate. The more appropriate it is for your body, the more positive outcomes you're going to get, which is strength, mobility, flexibility, maybe a change in symptom if your symptom is caused by weakness because you haven't been training your core. So let's jump into that. The first thing that's so easy to do, and most people overlook it because it's so easy, is check your motion. So before you do an exercise, just do the motion with no weight. See what your body does, check to see if there's anything symptomatic, see if there's any muscles pulling or tightness coming up. And you want to be noting these things like, hey, look, I do my side bend and I only get half as far as I think I should, or I only get half as far as the instructor is. Or if you're jumping into one of our Exercise for Life membership exercises, then you might be doing what it looks like Charlie and I are doing, or you might be doing less than that. That's fine. But what's important is that you're noting what your body does.
Yeah, absolutely. And so when we're talking about checking the motion, we're talking about, again, those 4 motions that your trunk and core performs. So check how it feels when you're folding or rounding forward. Check how it feels when you're extending or arching backwards. Check how it feels when you're doing that kind of side bend motion or that side crunch motion, one side and to the other. and then check how it feels when you're doing some twisting and turning each direction. Again, you're doing this kind of really slowly because you're not trying to see how far you move. That's not the goal. You're not trying to see how far you can fold forward or how far you can arch back. What you're trying to see is any sensations or signals that your body is giving you while you're doing it. Is there any kind of tightness? Is there any kind of pinching? Is there any kind of pain? And can you notice that at a subtle level before your body has to scream it to you? Okay. The reason why that's important is because once you can start to see, oh yeah, when I fold forward, that's where I start to feel things tighten up. When I arch back, that's where I start to feel things tighten up. Now, those markers, those kind of become the parameters that you work in. So that's where the amount of motion matters, but you're not saying, okay, can I fold forward enough to touch my toes? Or can I fold forward enough? Like I remember as a kid, touch my nose to my knees or something like that, right?
Right.
Like we're not doing it to check it in that manner. We're saying, okay, well, at what point when I start to fold forward, does something start to feel weird, or does it feel like I can't move anymore? And there's like, okay, now I'm making a mental note of that.
So absolutely, Charlie, you want to be checking your motion, making a mental note, because this is how you're going to know how much your body needs. I don't know how much your body needs until you check it. You're not going to know how much your body needs till you check it. And then you have to be listening, right? If you're feeling zinging, pain, tightness generating, those are all your body's signs to tell you to stop. And so even if you're doing less motion than you think you should, stick with what your body is telling you. The next thing you need to do is to begin with a squeeze. So you're all set up to do a core motion and you're like, okay, I know my range of motion here. The next thing I need to do is start with a squeeze. Now, we say start with a squeeze because most people start with a motion. And when you start with a motion, there's a very high chance that you then violate the motion that you just checked in step number 1. So then step number 1 wasn't, used very well. So go ahead and start with your squeeze, and you want to feel like you're connecting with the contraction that you're making, and you're going to squeeze as you move through the range. And now obviously you're going to first stop to stay within the range that you collected from step number 1. And number 2, you have to only go where your squeeze leads you. It's very hard to go too far when you're focusing on the muscle squeeze that you're using.
Right, exactly. So what does this look like in practice? So let's say you're going to do a crunch and you're lying on the ground, your knees are bent, your feet are on the ground, and you're going to kind of crunch up into like a ball or crunch position, okay? Well, the first thing that we're going to do before we even do that is we're just going to see how it feels just kind of rounding the spine, not while we are on the ground in the crunch position, but maybe while you're seated in a chair or while you're standing, just kind of see how that motion feels and kind of make some mental notes. Okay, yeah, for the most part, it feels okay. There's no pinching, there's no zinging, there's no extreme tightness, anything like that. Okay, cool. Then you get into your crunch position, and before you start doing crunches, you think, okay, what muscles do I expect to feel burning? Right? Like you might not know their names or whatever, but a general area of like, okay, I expect that if I do this long enough, like this is going to be the area that I feel burning. And so for most of us, when we're doing crunches, we're thinking, okay, well, it's going to be our abs, like the front of our abdomen that we're going to feel burning. So start by then initiating a squeeze with those muscles and just kind of making that mind muscle connection with those abs and just maintain that connection, practice feeling those muscles squeeze. So then that's step 2. So step 1, just kind of do the motion in general. And then step 2, thinking about, okay, well, what muscles would I expect to feel burning with this? And just practice squeezing those. And then that will set you up for step number 3 of this process.
You're right, Charlie. So focusing on that muscle squeeze is just this key component of staying connected and making sure that you're not violating your range that you deciphered in step number 1. Now, step number 3, which is our final step, is that you have to challenge the motion. So many people work on their core and they'll tell me about stretches, that aren't challenging. And then they'll tell me about, some body, weight, some stuff. Okay, we actually have to challenge your body. I know that Charlie and I are all about giving you the parameters and rules to keep you safe, but that also means that these are the rules to keep you safe and keep things effective. Once you got those covered, we have to be challenging your body. We are not all about easy exercise. We're about exercise feeling great, but it doesn't mean that you get to do nothing or get to do very minimal challenge. Now, to actually make your core stronger and to get what we hope to get out of this, which is hey, I do core exercises and then my core feels stronger. It's more mobile. I'm not flared up. I get flared up less often. When my back flares up, it's for 2 minutes rather than 2 months. That's what we're looking for. So you have to be challenging the motion because, again, we have to condition these muscles to tolerate stress. If we want our exercise to translate into a life that we can do some stuff, then it has to be challenging with all the parameters of respecting your range of motion, checking your range of motion, starting with the squeeze, connecting all the things we're talking about and things we talk about in other podcasts too. You have to be challenging that motion to actually get the conditioning and strengthening effect to those muscles.
Exactly. And in particular, when we're talking about challenging the motion, we're talking about adding some load, adding some weight, adding some resistance to doing that motion. But here's what so many people do. They'll be like, okay, cool. Like, I'll move my body around, make sure things feel good. I'll call that my warm up. And then, maybe I'll do some, just kind of like lighter weights or maybe just kind of like body weight and, make sure everything feels good. Like I'll call that, connecting with my muscles or whatever. And then, okay, I'm going to load it up. And their brain totally shuts off from thinking about the squeeze and goes to, okay, now it's time to move the weight. It's like, no. That's not what we're recommending, okay? Step number 1, yes, do the motion. See if anything feels weird, feels funky, okay? Number 2, connect, with your muscles. Really focus on generating that squeeze. Start with that squeeze of the muscles that you expect to kind of be burning as you're fatiguing while you're doing the exercise. And then step number 3, once you add that load, once you, hold on to that dumbbell or that plate or sit on the machine or whatever, and you're about to do that crunch or whatever core exercise you're going to do, you still need to start with the squeeze. You still need to focus on squeezing and contracting your muscles. You're just doing it against a greater load now, which is why step 2 is so important. Because if you do it and you do it consistently, it will prime you as like a reminder of like, okay, yeah, this is the thing that I actually need to be focusing on while I'm doing the exercise. Not necessarily like trying to move as much as I can, but rather trying to squeeze as much as I can. And as long as you keep that at the forefront while you're doing the exercise, then the amount of load that you use, it's going to be far less likely that it ends up being detrimental to how your body feels and functions, because you're going to be more likely to stay within the range of motion that's agreeable for your body. You're going to be more likely to do a volume of the exercise that's agreeable for your body, and you're going to be focusing on the feedback from your muscles the entire time because you're just focused on what they are sensing and what they're doing the entire time, which means as soon as something starts to feel a little bit off for your body, you're going to pick up on that. You're going to perceive it much more quickly than you otherwise would if you're focused on cranking out the reps or the music or anything like that. And so you follow this framework and it becomes far less likely that the core work that you're trying to do to strengthen your core and to help you feel and function better actually leaves you feeling worse. It's going to be far less likely that happens when you follow these 3 steps.
Charlie, we've had this conversation so many times with clients that we've made an entire program in our Exercise for Life membership called Core and Cardio. And we've just had amazing feedback on this because we realized, hey, we need to walk people through this, show people how easy it is. Sometimes I think when people listen to our steps, it can seem like, well, really, I just want to go to the gym and just do it. Well, it's a lot faster than you might think, working through this process of checking your motion, starting with the squeeze and challenging the motion. And we do all these steps for you, with you, in our Core and Cardio program, which is an 8 workout long program that's nestled right into our Exercise for Life membership. And the feedback that we've gotten on this program has been amazing in terms of helping people feel like, hey, I finally actually feel like my core is stronger. It's more mobile. It's not causing me flare-ups as much, because that's the sign of like you're appropriately doing your exercise, meaning your body is now becoming more resilient to your life.
Absolutely. I mean, and honestly, like, what's the alternative, right? I mean, the alternative is you can keep either A, trying to pound away at doing the core exercises the way you're currently doing them, knowing that, any given day, like things could flare up and you end up feeling worse or feeling like you're out of the game for a while, not able to exercise for a while. Or you just decide like, yeah, I'm just done with it overall and I'm not going to do any core strengthening exercises because every time I do, it's just a roll of the dice until my back flares up, right? And so really neither of those are good options, because either your core is trying to get stronger, but eventually you're going to have to take, a long time off to, let your body recover. Or you just decide, yeah, I'm just going to skip that altogether. I'm just going to let my core get weaker day by day. So neither of those are good options. So if you're feeling like you're in that boat where like, okay, how do I go about strengthening my core without making my body feel worse? These 3 steps really are the keys to being able to do that. Check your motion, start with the squeeze, and then challenge the motion. And when you're able to do that consistently, what we have seen time and again is you will be able to build the strength of your core. You'll be able to build the function of your core without those flare-ups that you may be currently accustomed to or that you want to avoid. But more than that, you'll find that you're able to move easier throughout your day. That these daily tasks that, once used to leave your low back fatigued, you're able to do them for longer periods of time. You're like, oh yeah, I got this. Carrying groceries, walking up and down stairs, or just sitting at your desk. You don't feel like, oh my gosh, I'm just hunching over now and now I just feel lousy. Like so many people have gone through our core and cardio program within the Exercise for Life membership and reported, yeah, wow, I feel more connected with my core. I feel like my core is stronger and able to do the things now that I want to do without feeling like my back, my low back, my mid back, my upper back is a liability from keeping me from doing those things.
If you are loving this content, you're excited to start changing how you're strengthening your core, definitely apply the 4 main motions and then use the 3 steps to make sure that you stay safe and effective with those exercises. If you would like to join me and Charlie in our workouts from our membership, all you have to do is go to www.exerciseforlifestudios.com/membership. A lot of the details that we talked about, we apply directly in our specifically core and cardio program. So you can go ahead and try that one first. We also have tons of other options that you can check out that all apply these same principles to leave you feeling stronger, more functional, and healthier. Now, using exercise to improve your health, your function, and your strength is a lot easier than a lot of people think. We help you do it right from the comfort of your own home from our membership.
So who do you know that needs to hear this episode? Who do you know that is trying to strengthen their core, but every time they do, it leaves their body feeling worse? Share this episode with them so they can understand why their crunches aren't cutting it and what they should be doing about it. And while you're online, head on over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a rating and review. It helps people find our podcast when they're looking for information on exercise and when they're looking for information on health. So if you found value in this conversation today, let us know by leaving us that 5-star rating and review. Well, thanks so much for tuning in. We always appreciate it. Have a fantastic week, and we'll talk with you all next week. This podcast is for information purposes only. The statements and views on this podcast are not medical advice. This podcast, including Julie and Charlie Cates, disclaim responsibility for any possible adverse effects from the use of information contained herein. Opinions of guests are their own, and this podcast does not endorse or accept responsibility for statements made by guests. This podcast does not make any representations or warranties about guest qualifications or credibility. This podcast may contain paid endorsements or advertisements for products or services. Individuals on this podcast may have a direct or indirect financial interest in products or services referred to herein. If you think you have a medical issue, consult a licensed physician.